They say that advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. But what if the most powerful magic lies in the unbreakable spirit of a race that refuses to be tamed? Commander Kell, a veteran of the Kesek military force, was about to uncover a truth that would shake the foundations of everything his civilization believed about war and power. Assigned to assess the training methods of the Earth's military academy, West Point, he expected to find a primitive and technologically inferior force. What he discovered forever changed the way the galaxy views humanity. Have you ever wondered why the most advanced races in the universe tremble at the mention of human warriors? Why civilizations with technology thousands of years ahead of ours hesitate to provoke conflict with Earth? The answer lies in a training system so brutal and efficient that it defies the very logic of modern warfare. This is the story of the day one of the most respected alien commanders discovered that true strength does not reside in quantum computers or energy weapons. It lies in the indestructible spirit of a species that has turned its deadly planet into a forge of unbeatable warriors. Prepare for a journey that will change your perspective on human potential and reveal why we are known throughout the galaxy as the Death Worlders, the warriors who turn chaos into their greatest weapon. The fine rain falling over West Point seemed to dance to the rhythm of the synchronized steps of the cadets in formation. Commander Kell, a veteran of the Kesek military force, observed the scene with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. His eyes, accustomed to decades of space combat in controlled environments, followed every movement of the young recruits with growing interest. For him, who commanded entire fleets with the simple press of a button, this training seemed primitive, almost barbaric. But there was something there, something that made his military instincts resonate in a way he couldn't explain. The leaden sky set the stage for a display of endurance that defied Kesek logic. The cadets marched relentlessly, their soaked uniforms clinging to their bodies as instructors barked orders in voices that cut through the air like blades. The discipline was palpable, but it was not the robotic discipline Kell was familiar with. It was something more visceral, deeper, something that seemed to rise from the very bowels of the muddy earth beneath their feet. The commander's tactical mind tried to process the scene, searching for familiar patterns amidst the apparent chaos. Varric, his assistant, frantically consulted his analysis devices, trying to quantify what they were witnessing. "Commander, the physical stress levels of these humans. They are far beyond the acceptable parameters for standard military training." Kell merely nodded, his eyes fixed on a particularly determined group of cadets who stood out even under the curtain of rain. They weren't merely enduring the training, they seemed to challenge it, as if each raindrop, each step in the mud, was a personal trial to be conquered. The sound of boots striking the soaked ground created a primitive symphony that echoed across the training fields. Kell noticed how the instructors alternated between harsh commands and words of encouragement, a psychological dance that seemed to further reinforce the cadets' determination. It was a stark contrast to the Kesek methods of mental conditioning through computer simulations and virtual reality. Here, the battlefield was real, tangible, and unforgiving. As the afternoon progressed, the intensity of the training only increased. Kell witnessed exercises that seemed to push the very limits of physical endurance. The cadets faced obstacles, carried weights, crawled through the mud, all without the aid of any advanced technology. It was as if humans were deliberately choosing the hardest, most brutal path. For a race that had access to cutting-edge technology, this seemed like an absurd contradiction. One cadet, in particular, caught Kell's attention. She had fallen during an especially grueling exercise, but before any instructor could intervene. Her comrades were already there, helping her up. There was no shame in her fall, only renewed determination in her eyes. It was a form of brotherhood that transcended mere military camaraderie, a bond forged in the heat of shared suffering, tempered by constant adversity. The sun was beginning to set when Kell finally understood what he was witnessing. This was not merely military training. It was a process of transformation. Each cadet marching under that relentless rain was being shaped not just into a soldier, but into something more, a warrior of chaos, a survivor of hell. And as he observed the cadets' determined faces, a disturbing question began to form in his mind. What would happen when these warriors were unleashed on a real battlefield? Dawn brought with it a new kind of ordeal. Harlow, the human guide assigned to accompany Commander Kell, led him down a muddy path to an area that looked more like a scar upon the land. The scent of metal and sweat hung in the air as the cadets prepared to face the infamous mud pit crawl. The KSEC commander's eyes widened as he took in the brutality of what he was about to witness. There were no simulators, no augmented reality, only earth, blood, and sheer determination. Beneath a tangled mass of barbed wire stretching for hundreds of meters, the cadets crawled like primitive predators. The mud was not just an obstacle. It was a living entity that drained strength and willpower. The instructors, acting as architects of chaos, threw more wet earth onto the recruits, shouting orders that merged with the deafening sound of simulated explosions. Kell watched, mesmerized, as his concept of military training shattered before his eyes. The physical training that followed further challenged the alien commander's understanding. While the KSEC relied on exoskeletons and neural amplifiers to enhance their capabilities, humans seemed determined to extract every ounce of potential from their natural bodies. "This is madness," Kell exclaimed, his voice betraying a mix of horror and fascination. How can they expect modern warriors to subject themselves to such brutality? Harlow merely smiled, a smile that carried the weight of millennia of warrior evolution. The scene before them continued to unfold like a primal ritual. A cadet emerged from the mud, his uniform unrecognizable beneath layers of dirt, but his eyes burned with an intensity Kell had never seen in his own soldiers. It was a gaze that spoke of triumph, of an internal battle far more significant than any technological confrontation. The KSEC trained for technical perfection, but humans, they trained for the impossible. The sound of a horn cut through the air, and a new wave of cadets plunged into the trial. Kell noticed how they moved in perfect synchrony, even under conditions that would make most alien warriors surrender. It was not just physical endurance, it was a demonstration of adaptability that defied all logic. Each obstacle overcome, each meter conquered in the mud, was proof that human limits were far more elastic than any species had ever imagined. As he watched a particularly determined group emerge from the final stretch of the course, Kell began to understand something fundamental about human training. It was not just about preparing soldiers for war. It was about forging warriors who could thrive in absolute chaos. The technological failures that so greatly concerned the KSEC were merely minor inconveniences to these deathworlders, who had learned to fight and win under the most adverse conditions imaginable. The afternoon sun had already begun its descent when Harlow led Kell away from the training field. The alien commander walked in silence, his mind processing everything he had witnessed. The success rates of this type of training defied any conventional military logic, and yet there were the results, covered in mud and glory. But as they moved away, a new apprehension began to grow in his chest. If this was merely basic training, what else did the humans have in store to show? The answer to that question came sooner than Commander Kell had expected. In the heart of West Point, an ancient trial awaited, the Crucible, a test of endurance that made the most rigorous KSEC training seem like child's play. 48 hours of near-total deprivation, where sleep became a distant luxury and hunger a constant companion. By the standards of any advanced spacefaring civilization, this would be classified as torture. For the humans, it was just another day of forging warriors. The air was thick with palpable tension, as Kell observed a group of cadets facing their greatest challenge. Their exhaustion-marked faces told stories of sleepless nights and days of superhuman effort. A massive log, which could easily be moved by any basic exoskeleton, was being carried up a mountain by sheer willpower and exhausted muscles alone. The alien commander's military mind struggled to process the logic, or the apparent lack thereof, behind such an ordeal. The scene unfolding before his eyes challenged his perceptions even further. One of the cadets, visibly at the limit of his strength, staggered and fell. In KSEC exercises, this would mean automatic failure and disqualification. But here, something extraordinary happened. Without hesitation, his comrades regrouped, redistributed the weight, and, as a single entity, continued their seemingly impossible journey. It was more than teamwork. It was a demonstration of brotherhood, forged in the heat of shared suffering. Kel noticed how the instructors observed everything with predator-like eyes, their expressions unreadable. When the group finally reached the top, exhausted but triumphant, the mentor's response was brutally simple. "Good job. Now go down and do it again." There was no celebration, no pause for recovery. The human spirit was being tested to its absolute limit, and then pushed even further. The hours dragged on, and with them, Kel witnessed an endless succession of challenges designed to break both body and mind. The cadets faced impossible situations with a determination that bordered on insanity. It was as if each new trial, each new obstacle, only fueled an inner flame that refused to be extinguished. The commander began to understand why humans were known as warriors of chaos. They did not just survive in chaos, they embraced it like an old friend. The sun set and rose again, but the crucible remained relentless. Kel observed how the bonds between the cadets strengthened with each passing hour. It was not just about physical or mental endurance. It was about forging a unit so strong that no adversity could break it. While his own soldiers relied on protocols and advanced technology, these humans were learning to depend on something far more fundamental: one another. Darkness began to fall again when Kel finally grasped the true nature of what he was witnessing. This was not just a test of endurance or a trial of strength. It was a ritual of transformation. Every cadet who emerged on the other side of the crucible was not merely a survivor, but a warrior reborn from the ashes of exhaustion itself. And as he watched another group prepare for yet another impossible climb, an even more unsettling question began to form in his mind. If this was the training for peacetime, what would humans be capable of when they truly faced war? The answer began to take shape when Harlow led Commander Kel and his assistant, Varric, to a densely wooded area on the outskirts of the academy. The air was heavy with the scent of decaying vegetation and damp earth. "What if we left them with just a knife and a rope?" Harlow suggested with a casual smile that made Kel question whether he had translated correctly. But there was no translation error. The cadets were indeed about to face the wilderness with nothing but primitive tools. The KSEC commander's eyes widened as he watched the young warriors building shelters with branches and leaves, their bare hands working the earth as if they were living tools. There were no support drones hovering above, no survival exoskeletons, only humans using their natural adaptability to tame the hostile environment. Varric frantically consulted his sensors, as if searching for some hidden technology that could explain such a display of primitive skill. The sound of snapping twigs and striking stones echoed through the forest as the cadets created fire without any technological assistance. Kel observed, fascinated, as they transformed basic resources into survival tools. It was a stark contrast to KSEC methods, where every soldier carried an arsenal of emergency devices. "How can you entrust your lives to such rudimentary methods?" he asked, his voice betraying a mixture of disbelief and growing respect. The answer came through a practical demonstration. A group of cadets had improvised hunting traps using only materials found in the forest. Their techniques were primitive but lethally efficient. Kel began to understand why humans were classified as death worlders. They did not merely survive in hostile environments, they thrived in them. Every challenge was faced not with superior technology, but with a lethal combination of adaptive intelligence and indomitable willpower. The sun was beginning to set when one of the instructors deliberately sabotaged the basic equipment of a group of cadets. Instead of panic, Kel witnessed something remarkable: instant improvisation. The technological failures that would have crippled other spacefaring warriors were merely another obstacle to be overcome. Humans did not depend on technology to survive. They treated it as a convenient tool, not a vital necessity. As night approached, the forest took on a new dimension of challenges. The cadets moved through the shadows with an agility that resembled natural predators. Kel noticed how they used the environment to their advantage, turning every apparent disadvantage into a tactical opportunity. It was a display of adaptability that went beyond simple military training. It was the expression of a survival instinct, refined by millennia of evolution in a world of death. Darkness had fully settled when Harlow finally led Kell back to the edge of the forest. The alien commander walked in silence, his mind processing the implications of what he had witnessed. Humans were not just trained warriors, they were natural survivors, capable of transforming any environment into their battlefield. And as the lights of the military base flickered in the distance, a new understanding began to take shape. What would happen when these masters of survival were unleashed in a real combat scenario? The answer did not take long to arrive. The West Point combat training field revealed itself as a symphony of controlled chaos that made Commander Kell question everything he knew about military preparation. The air was thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder and the deafening sound of live fire cut through the atmosphere. These were not simulations, not attenuated energy beams. These were lethal projectiles, real explosions, and grenades that could easily end a life with a single mistake. The veteran Kessek's eyes widened as he saw a bullet ricochet dangerously close to a cadet who didn't even blink as he methodically advanced between the barricades. The suffocating smoke covering the field was not generated by effect machines. It was the real result of war explosives. "This is complete insanity," Kell protested, his voice almost lost amid the sound of another explosion. Harlow responded with a disturbingly simple statement. "Better that they learn the taste of death here than meet it unprepared on the battlefield." The hand-to-hand combat training that followed was even more visceral. Kell watched, mesmerized, as the cadets engaged in fights that seemed more fitting for wild predators than for soldiers of a spacefaring civilization. Punches, kicks, elbow strikes, and knee blows were exchanged with an intensity that made the alien commander's blood run cold. There were no elaborate rules, no artificial limits, only the brutal reality of combat in its rawest form. A cadet fell, his face marked by effort and blood. For a moment, Kell expected the instructors to stop the exercise. Instead, he witnessed something that defied his understanding. The instructor dragged the cadet back into the fight as soon as he caught his breath. "War doesn't wait," Harlow explained, noticing the shock on the commander's face. "In real battle, there is no pause for recovery, no time to lick your wounds. Either you get up and keep fighting, or you die." The sound of gunfire continued to echo across the field as a new group of cadets advanced through a simulated war zone, one with very real dangers. Kell noticed how they moved in perfect synchronization, covering one another, communicating through silent gestures that seemed more instinctive than learned. It was a deadly dance where every misstep could lead to fatal consequences. The limitless warfare practiced here by the humans had nothing in common with the clinically precise battles of the Kessek. As the day progressed, the commander began to perceive a disturbing pattern. The instructors deliberately created situations where technology failed, forcing the cadets to improvise under intense fire. Weapons jammed at the worst possible moment, communicators ceased functioning during crucial maneuvers, and yet, the humans kept advancing, adapting, overcoming. It was as if every technical failure only served to highlight their true strength, the ability to thrive in absolute chaos. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of red that resembled blood. When Kell finally understood the true nature of what he was witnessing, the humans were not merely training soldiers. They were forging warriors of chaos, masters of improvisation, and survivors of hell itself. Every live round, every explosion, every drop of blood shed in training served a greater purpose. And as he watched one last group of cadets emerge from the smoke, covered in dirt and sheer determination, an even more unsettling question began to form. If this was the level of commitment to combat training, what would happen when these warriors faced the true test of the human military mind? The answer came in the form of a seemingly simple room that Harlow called the stress testing chamber. At first glance, it was almost disappointing after everything Commander Kell had witnessed. There was no mud, no blood, none of the tangible chaos of the battlefield. Just a climate-controlled room with high-definition screens and a single cadet sitting in the center. But when the simulations began, Kell understood. This was not a test of the body, but a trial that reached into the farthest limits of the human mind. The projected scenario was pure digital chaos, deafening explosions, cries for help coming from all directions, contradictory orders flooding the communication channels, reports of critical system failures. The cadet at the center of it all remained unnervingly calm, his eyes focused as he coordinated the movements of imaginary troops, adjusted tactics in real time, and made decisions that could mean life or death. Sweat dripped down his face, but his hands remained steady on the controls. Kell watched, fascinated, as the instructors gradually increased the intensity of the test. Cascading system failures, massive troop losses, mission objectives shifting every minute. It was a tactical nightmare that would have made even the most experienced Kesek commanders doubt their abilities. But the human cadet did not just endure. He adapted, found impossible solutions, turned certain defeats into improbable victories. It was like watching a maestro conducting an orchestra of chaos. The monitors flickered with real-time data on the cadet's physiological state, heart rate, cortisol levels, brain activity. Harlow explained that the true test was not about winning the simulation, but about maintaining mental clarity under extreme stress. Anyone can make decisions when they are calm, he said, his voice low but intense. But in real battle you have to think clearly while the world collapses around you. That is what we are training here, an indestructible mind. The determination in the cadet's eyes was unlike anything Kell had encountered in his decades of military service. It was not the cold precision of Kesek warriors, trained to follow protocols with mathematical exactness. It was something more primitive, yet more sophisticated at the same time, a near supernatural ability to thrive in absolute chaos. Each new challenge, each new complication that the instructors introduced seemed only to fuel an inner flame that refused to be extinguished. The hours dragged on, and with them, Kell witnessed something that defied his understanding of the limits of mental endurance. The cadet was not merely surviving the test. He seemed to grow stronger with each new impossible scenario. It was as if stress, rather than wearing down his ability to think, only sharpened his mind to an even keener edge. The instructors exchanged significant glances. They were witnessing the forging of something special. When the test finally ended, the silence that fell over the room was almost tangible. The cadet rose slowly, his eyes still holding that unwavering glow of determination. Kell noticed how the instructors treated him with a respect that went beyond military hierarchy. It was the acknowledgement of someone who had faced the impossible and emerged even stronger. And as he watched the young warrior leave the room, a disturbing realization began to take shape in his mind. What would happen when this indestructible mind was combined with everything else he had witnessed at West Point? The final answer came when the rain returned, closing a cycle that had begun with his first sight of the cadets marching under the downpour. Now, however, Commander Kell observed the scene with different eyes. The young warriors continued their relentless march, their bodies exhausted, soaked to the bone, but their spirits burning with an intensity that made the rain itself seem powerless. They were no longer just recruits in training. They were the embodiment of something that made the veteran Kesek tremble inside. The numbers did not lie, and Kell had spent the previous night obsessively analyzing them. A 95% completion rate in the Crucible, a number that defied all probabilities established by any other known species. Systematic deprivation of sleep, food, and comfort was not just a training method. It was a transformation tool that forged warriors capable of thriving under the most extreme conditions imaginable. Humans did not merely prepare for the worst. They embraced it like an old friend. The use of real weapons, real combat, and real risks had initially seemed like madness to the alien commander. Now he understood. The war offered no second chances, and humans refused to give their warriors the illusion of safety. Every drop of blood spilled in training was an investment in future survival. Every scar a lesson etched not only in flesh but in the very soul. The human military mind was not merely trained, it was completely reconstructed. As he watched the cadets marching through the storm, Kell reflected on the transformation he himself had undergone. He had arrived at West Point expecting to find a primitive military force, reliant on brutality to compensate for its lack of technological sophistication. What he had discovered was something far more unsettling. A species that mastered the most advanced technology, yet deliberately chose to train its warriors to thrive without it. Human willpower was not just a trait, it was a weapon more lethal than any Kasek device. The rain began to fall harder as Harlow approached for the final farewell. The human guide maintained that same enigmatic smile that had accompanied every shocking revelation of the past days. "So, Commander," he asked casually, "do you still think our methods are irrational?" Kell thought of all the times he had used that word, irrational, to describe what he had witnessed. Now he realized that the true irrationality would be to underestimate a species capable of such determination. As he ascended the ramp of his command ship, the veteran Kasek paused for a moment, his eyes fixed on the scene he was leaving behind. The cadets continued their endless march, their indomitable spirits shining through the curtain of rain. "Now I understand," he murmured, more to himself than to Harlow, "why they fear you." The human guide's smile only widened. "And does that scare you, Commander?" Kell swallowed hard, feeling the weight of a realization that would forever change how he viewed not just humans, but the very nature of war. Yes, he was scared, but there was something else, something that went beyond fear. It was a feeling he had never expected to develop toward a race he once considered technologically inferior. Respect. Deep, unconditional respect for these Death Worlders, these warriors of chaos, these survivors of hell who had turned their own deadly planet into a forge of unbeatable soldiers. And as his ship lifted off, one last question echoed in his mind. When the galaxy finally understood the full extent of what humans were capable of, would it already be too late? And what do you think Commander Kell reported to his superiors when he returned? How did the galaxy react upon discovering the true nature of human military training? If this story sparked your imagination, you will be amazed by what comes next. In the next video, we will reveal what happened when a Kasek squadron first faced a platoon of human marines in real combat. Spoiler, they were not prepared for what they encountered. Want to discover more stories about how humanity became the most feared and respected force in the galaxy? Subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Every week, we bring new stories that show why we are known as the most lethal warriors in the known universe. And don't forget to leave a comment. Which aspect of human training do you think impressed Commander Kell the most? The brutality of physical training, the intensity of real combat, or the forging of an indestructible mind? See you in the next video, where the legend of human warriors continues to grow.